Hello and welcome again to this special episode of the Money Marketing Podcast in association with Standard Life. I'm joined today once again by Mark Baldwin and also Andy Brown. So in our last episode, Mark was with us, but Andy, could you give us a bit of a background into yourself and what you do at Standard Life?
Sure. So Andy Brown, I'm head of fund solutions for Standard Life. What that means is it's my responsibility to try to interpret what the market is telling us, how customers react to market conditions, the types of plans, the outcomes that they want, and interrogate that and work it into a product, a fund, a mechanism that helps the advisor deliver the thing that the client is actually looking for.
Okay. And Mark, I'm sure everyone has heard from our last episode, but give us a bit of a background into what you do as well.
Mark Baldwin, head of smooth managed funds, effectively means what Andy's just spoken about. One of those particular fund solutions is a smooth managed fund. I run the distribution of that fund, and also I run the proposition function that manages that fund in market.
Okay, fantastic. So today's episode, we're going to be covering the tension between living for today and saving for tomorrow, why industry innovation often fails because if its focus is on formulas rather than the human need for security and trust. I have to say I've been a living for today type of person, but I'm trying to evolve into that saving for the future. So I'm hoping that your insight will shift my mindset. So Andy, to start, your notes that you had sent to me, you hit on a really human concept, the balance between the desire to save for the future and the desire to feel better today. Do you think that compromise is the single biggest barrier to retirement planning rather than just lack of money?
I don't think it's the single biggest barrier, but I think it's a barrier that's immediately in front of anyone from the day they get their salary paid, their bonuses paid, or they receive some additional cash. It's the what can I do with this? It's exciting. I remember as a kid, my first job, and suddenly thinking, my first job was working in Burton the Tailors as a youth opportunities. I got £12.50 a week, and I was given £12.50 in a paycheck, and I thought, oh my God, I'm 16 years old, I'm rich. And what did I do with it? I went and bought a huge big box of Golden Wonder crisps. Nobody will remember Golden Wonder crisps. They were the best crisps, cheese and onion crisps, and myself and my mates basically sat down on the wall and ate this whole box of 50 odd bags of crisps and thought this is fantastic. And then of course I go home and have a chat with my mum and dad and they say, right, so you've got bus fares to get to work tomorrow, you've got this to do and that to do. And I thought, this is why the immediate approach does it. And that's been the case through all of our lives. Each one of us goes through something. It's whether it's the first house you buy, you fall in love with the very first one you see, so you must have that house, and then you suddenly realise, well, actually there might be another one just round the corner or just in the next village or thing. So there's always an immediate reaction to what can I do with this money, and the reaction is not I need to save some money for the future for those times when I don't have any cash.
And Mark, looking at the Next Wealth report, it looks at the iceberg model where the stated goal, like I want to retire at 60, is just the tip, but the emotional drivers sit underneath. Does that align with what Andy is saying, that we are trying to solve an emotional problem, feeling good today, with a logical spreadsheet?
I think it aligns with what Andy's saying. What I'd say is that the difference between thinking about your retirement and being 16 on a wall eating 50 bags of crisps with your friends there's quite a quantum shift between those two. But certainly as people are transitioning towards their retirement and it becomes more tangible, it becomes more relevant to people, then there is a significant emotional shift then, and people start to fear things, people start to get anxious. A lot of research will tell you that as people are heading towards that retirement point, those are all the emotions that start to drive forward. People will have a different relationship with money and saving and investing. It becomes less about building as much as you can into, well, actually I'm moving from being a saver to being a spender. How long will I need to spend for? These are all the emotions that start to come to play. I think from a positioning point of view, and the kind of crux of your question is that how can you get people to anchor early on so that that remains an important part of the rationale and the reason why they're saving for tomorrow? That's an important connection to make.
Okay. And Andy, you mentioned that the industry often tries to innovate with mathematical formulas that real people do not understand. And if they don't understand, they cannot trust it. Is that complexity actually backfiring and pushing people away from investing?
I think so. I think it's really hard for people to connect with a financial plan at different stages of their life. You can connect more the closer you get to the goal period,
Yes.
let's call it retirement in this
Yeah.
case. So you can start to think, is this enough money to turn into an income that I can live on? First question is, what's enough?
Exactly.
When you're early on in your career and money's been just taken from your salary and it goes over there, you can't really connect with what happens with that money. You just think that there's a pension there, there's a contribution we made for me, I'll be okay. So the connection is very much one where you have to move from the mathematical problem into the behavioural problem. It is, how does this make me feel? What am I going to do with this money? I kind of still firmly believe that as much as we plan to have an outcome in retirement that is involved around an amount of income every month or year, the reality is I have no idea what I'm going to spend that money on. Because the first 2, 3, 4 years of retirement, I've never been there before.
Yeah.
So I can have a great plan and I can use a cash flow tool, and it's told me that you have enough money to give you £20,000 per annum. And I might sit down and think, well, I don't have to get the bus into work anymore. I don't have to buy any more shoes. I don't have to do those things. But I'm going to spend my money elsewhere. And I think some of the problems there that we can't see, that maths doesn't solve, is I'm not quite sure we're all very honest with ourselves about how much we actually spend. You know,
I definitely like myself.
an eye-opening thing for me was my wife and I opened up a Starling account, and it's got spaces in it, and I thought, well, this is fantastic. This just felt like my mum and dad putting money in the envelopes, putting it in the mantelpiece. That's for the milk money, that's for the groceries and so on. And you can do the same thing. Problem being is that you go back into those things and you see that thing on Amazon, you go, that's exactly what I need, I'll buy that. And you spend £5 on that. And then you see something on Temu and you spend £5 on that. By the end of the month, you look at your Starling account and it tells you exactly what you spent your money on. You go, yeah, I've spent about £100 on rubbish, absolute rubbish.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell anybody that. And of course, all those boxes disappear off, and you know, Rose will say to me, well, what did you spend that money on? No, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. And that's a big problem, that the connection is about what it feels like in retirement, what you're going to use that money for. It's not about building wealth, it's about building connection with what you're going to do.
Yeah. And Mark, the AKG report highlights that the rising cost of living is the number one worry for consumers right now. When people are stressed about today's bills, how can advisors keep them focused on that long-term objective without sounding tone deaf?
Yeah, I think to add to what Andy was saying, I think this is where advisors need twice the emotional skills, perhaps, that they've had historically. Empathy first, planning second.
Yeah.
You know, they're people, not spreadsheets. So the mathematical plan needs to be sound, but it's that emotional connection. It isn't about being tone deaf. It's about recognizing that those connections exist and trying to bring those to the fore and ensuring that clients are in tune with that connection of how retirement may pan out, how it will feel, what that connection is in that respect, how they will live it, what they will do, rather than just the pure mathematics of the financial plan.
Yeah. And Andy, finally, you said that we often don't save enough because we spend today, as you talked about with the Temu and Amazon spending, which I feel like you were talking about me. So this is part of the problem that the industry has made. Is part of the problem that the industry has made the golden egg of retirement feel too distant, while the pain of saving feels very immediate.
Yeah. I think the golden egg analogy is a good one because you don't realise that you are the goose.
Yeah.
You're the one that has to
Providing.
put the stuff together that's
Yeah.
going to lay the golden egg in however many years to go. And that again is a real personal behavioural issue. And it's one that can be trained if that's the right way. It can be coached. It can be. I remember having conversations with my dad about, you put 10% away, you put 20% away in that little envelope on top of the fireplace. Problem was I could still reach the envelope. It's making sure that it's away somewhere that's a little bit different. And it's one of the things I think the industry can do. It can deal with the more immediate impact of feeling like you're handing over responsibility for those savings to somebody else by being a bit more definite about what you're likely to achieve there. So most people are aware of the risks of investing. They see it in the front page of newspapers, they see it on podcasts, they hear it from a multitude of different sources each day. And the problem is that you react to the risks that's in front of you.
Yes.
You kind of forget about all the other risks that come behind it. And by focusing on that single risk, you actually create an even bigger risk. The risk is that you're focusing on that single risk.
Yeah.
And you're not thinking about what else could happen from that. And I think if we were able to kind of describe better the journey to the outcome for the client, then they might have a bit more, kind of feel a bit more sure about how they're going to get to that outcome. And that's got nothing to do with how I mix equities and bonds and property and alternative assets and so on. And it's got everything to do with how I help the advisor describe the journey, that investment journey, and how to make that more relevant to their client.
So a mix of making it relatable and also empathy and all that emotional intelligence work as well. So not just the spreadsheets, but the human behind it as well. Well, thank you both for joining me in this episode. This was very fascinating, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next episode.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.